In a quiet village near Kisumu lived a 72-year-old grandmother everyone called Mamma Akini. Her house was small, built from mud walls with a tin roof that sang loudly whenever it rained. Behind it stretched a narrow garden where she grew sukuma wiki, tomatoes, and a few rows of maize. Children from nearby homes often ran through her yard, knowing she would greet them with roasted groundnuts or a gentle blessing. She had deep lines across her face, but her smile could still light up the dusty road that led to her door. Years earlier, she had buried her husband, Otieno, after a long illness. They had shared nearly 50 years together. When he died, she thought that was the hardest pain she would ever endure. Her only son, Kamau, promised her she would never be alone. Soon after, he moved to Nairobi to search for better opportunities. At first, he called every Sunday. He told her about the tall buildings, the traffic, and his dream of building her a better house one day. Over time, the calls became shorter. Then they came once a month. Then, sometimes, not at all. Mamma Akini never complained. She would sit outside each evening, looking at the road, whispering small prayers for her son's safety. One gray afternoon, as heavy clouds gathered above the village, a motorbike stopped outside her gate. A young man removed his helmet slowly, his eyes unable to meet hers. Even before he spoke, her heart began to pound. He told her there had been an accident in the city, a bus, a hospital, and then silence. Her son was gone. The words did not feel real. The world around her seemed to blur. She gripped the wooden doorframe to steady herself. The young man kept talking, but his voice sounded far away. All she could hear was the echo of her son's laughter from years ago when he used to chase chickens in the yard. That night, the rain poured down harder than it had in months. Inside her small home, Mamma Akini sat alone on her bed. She did not cry loudly. She did not scream. Tears simply slipped down her cheeks as quietly as the rain outside. She felt as if the future had been erased. No more Sunday calls. No more promises of a better house. No more hope of seeing her son walk down that dusty road again. Neighbors came the next day, bringing food and soft words of comfort. They helped arrange the journey to bring his body home. During the funeral, Mamma Akini stood strong, greeting mourners with calm dignity. But inside, her heart felt hollow. She had buried her husband. Now she had buried her child. It felt unnatural, as though life had broken its own rules. After the funeral, the house grew painfully quiet. She would wake in the early morning, forgetting for a brief second what had happened. Then the memory would rush back like cold water. She began speaking to her son's photograph, telling him about the garden, about the neighbors, about how lonely the evenings felt. Days passed slowly. Sometimes she skipped meals because she had no appetite. Sometimes she sat for hours staring at the hills beyond her village. Grief wrapped around her like a heavy blanket she could not remove. Yet even in that darkness, something inside her refused to completely give up. She continued watering her plants. She continued greeting children who passed by. Her steps were slower, her smile more fragile, but she kept moving. She did not know that life was about to change again. She believed she had reached the end of her strength. She believed she was now truly alone. But the story of her overcoming had only just begun. 1 week after the funeral, 2 small figures stood at Mamma Akini's gate. A neighbor had brought them from the city. They were her grandchildren, Ayo and little Lila. Their mother had left years before, and after their father's sudden death, there was nowhere else for them to go. The children clung to a small, worn-out bag that carried all their belongings. Their eyes were red from crying. For a moment, Mamma Akini simply looked at them. They had her son's eyes. The same gentle shape. The same quiet expression. Her grief shifted instantly. It did not disappear, but it changed form. Now it carried responsibility. She opened her arms. "Come," she said softly. "This is your home. Hope, hope." The first nights were difficult. The children cried for their father. Mamma Akini would sit between them on the thin mattress, telling stories about how brave and hard-working he had been. Sometimes she cried with them, but she made sure they always fell asleep feeling safe. Money was scarce. Her small garden could not feed 3 mouths comfortably, so she decided to do something she had not done in years. Every morning before sunrise, she prepared roasted maize and boiled groundnuts. She walked nearly 3 kilometers to the roadside near the bus stop and began selling them. The sun was hot. Her back ached from standing for hours. Some days, customers passed without stopping. On other days, kind drivers bought extra and told her to keep the change. She saved every coin carefully in a small tin hidden beneath her bed. When she returned home each evening, the children would run to meet her. Ayo proudly showed her his schoolwork. Leila helped wash the dishes. Their laughter slowly began to fill the empty house. There were nights when Mamma Akini ate very little so the children could have more. She never told them. She would simply say she had already eaten at the market. Her stomach growled in the darkness, but her heart felt stronger knowing the children were fed. She also began teaching them small life lessons. "Pain does not mean the end," she told them one evening as they sat outside watching the sunset. "It can mean a new beginning if we are brave." Though she was tired, though her hands trembled more than before, she refused to let grief define their future. She no longer woke up wondering why she was still alive. She woke up knowing 2 young lives depended on her. And that purpose gave her strength she did not know she still had. The dry season came harsher than anyone expected. The soil cracked. The green leaves in her garden turned yellow. Without rain, her vegetables failed, and her small source of extra food disappeared. At the same time, school fees were due. One afternoon, Ayo returned home unusually quiet. He handed her a folded note from the headmaster. It explained gently but firmly that unless the fees were paid, the children would have to stay home. Mamma Akini felt her chest tighten. She counted the coins in her tin that night. It was not enough, not even close. For the first time since her son's death, she allowed herself to break down completely. After the children slept, she sat outside under the stars and cried openly. She felt tired beyond her years. She wondered how much more she could endure. The next morning, she still rose before dawn. Even with swollen eyes, she prepared her maize and walked to the roadside. But that day was different. A local teacher had heard about her situation and shared her story with members of the community. By midday, something unexpected began happening. A woman bought maize and quietly placed extra money in her basket. A man from the nearby shop brought her a small bag of flour. Another neighbor promised to speak to the headmaster. Within days, the community gathered around her in ways she had never imagined. Someone repaired her leaking roof. Another offered to help her carry goods to the roadside. The headmaster agreed to give her time to pay. Soon, her story reached a small charity group based in Mombasa. They visited her village, listened to her story, and offered to sponsor part of the children's education. They also helped her replace the simple roadside setup with a small wooden fruit stall closer to the market, reducing the long distance she had to walk. For the first time in many months, Mamma Akini felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She realized that while grief had isolated her, love was reconnecting her. She stood behind her new stall one afternoon, arranging oranges neatly in a basket, and felt something she had not felt since before her son's death.